and welcome to Gospel Entrepreneurs. I'm Roy Crowne from Revelation Trust, and in this podcast we hear from leaders in the church, community and business who are using their entrepreneurial spirit to share the good news of the gospel wherever they find themselves. In today's conversation, I'm joined by Rachel Baker, who is doing some incredible work at the Living Room in Tenerife. Rachel's story is one of really listening to God to hear his call for her life. Just a heads up, this podcast mentions some tricky subjects, including suicide. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.
We actually go back a bit when I was with Youth for Christ. I think I was National Director of Youth for Christ, and you joined one of our creative arts teams, didn't you, Rachel?
Yeah, that's right. It's a funny story, really, isn't it? But I'd not long been a Christian, actually. I'd just recently come back to Christ after quite a lot of years away. And I ended up just doing 2 years out on a team called Activate, which was at the performing arts side. So we were all singing, all dancing, and we used to go into schools and take assemblies and do lessons and share our testimonies and the gospel in schools nationwide. But it was a really foundational time for me, just coming out of a messy life and being in a Christian bubble that I kind of needed at that time just to send me off into where God was going to take me. So yeah, I love YFC. I've got such good memories of it.
Oh, that's great. And was that really where you caught the passion for the gospel and kind of seeing lives changed? Obviously, you'd had quite a dramatic coming back to the Lord, but was that really where you kind of caught what we're going to move on to, looking at Tenerife and all that? Was that where you sort of got that core into your life?
Yeah, it's so funny because looking back, quite a lot of things started then. I didn't really realise at the time. So one of them was a passion for youth work and working with young people. I'd never really done it before as such. And also just having the chance to start speaking in schools and sharing. Definitely that was the first time I'd done that then I've used and gone on to develop more, and just having a real heart for the gospel. Yeah, I think I've had that my whole life. So it was amazing to put that into action for the first time. Yeah.
And obviously it was a bit of a step of faith. It was kind of stepping out, I'm going to do this. There's a bit of an entrepreneur in you because you've pioneered a few different things, haven't you, Rachel? Give us a bit of the story of how you got involved in what you're now doing in Tenerife.
Yeah, so it has been an interesting journey, and I can see that every stage of my life has been like a stepping stone into the next part. So following working with YFC, I met a couple of other girls in my area in Sheffield, and we were youth workers. We all had performing arts in our background, and we had a passion for it and for young people. So we got together and we just really felt like God wanted to do something with us. We weren't sure what. And what we discovered was Sheffield, South Yorkshire, had the highest rate of teenage pregnancy in the UK. And so obviously that really stirred our hearts. And we spent quite a long time just praying and just chatting through what would those reasons be, researching it, speaking to professionals, speaking to people. And we really felt like the root of that was low self-esteem and bad choices in sex and relationships. And so we spent a long time just discussing like, what is self-esteem? Because we didn't want to just write or deliver a course that was just saying, you're nice, God loves you, so, you should like yourself too. Because we really felt like that hadn't been what had helped us in our past. So yeah, we just really pulled it apart and went down to lots of different areas and ended up putting together an 8-week course for girls, for females, to deliver in schools and youth groups across Britain, but mainly Sheffield, really get into that nitty gritty. And we wanted it not to be classroom based. So we designed the room so that we'd have these big cushions that we could push the tables back and get the girls all sat around. And we wanted to really do it through discussion, through picking apart what was that relationship, why was that choice made, and then giving the girls a bit of space to make good decisions before they were in a moment drunk at a party where they might then decide to think through an issue they'd never thought through before.
And obviously, you were going to do that, Rachel, anyway, because you're creative. So you're not going to do it in a classroom setting. You've always been creative. It is what you had. So how did you move from there to Tenerife? Give us that story.
Yeah, so alongside setting up that charity, it's funny, I'd done a couple of short-term missions with 24/7, and I actually found out about them because my team leader when I was on YFC had done the missions before, and he said, you would be brilliant at this. So I was like, why not? That sounds good. I'll go out for 2 weeks in the sun and on mission. That sounds exciting. And it absolutely changed my life because I think before then I'd kind of thought that if someone had an interest in God and maybe came into a church, they could encounter him and that would be really great. But what I'd never experienced before was going out of the building to people, having prayer times, praying for people, having words that we were sharing in clubs with people who were breaking down in tears and praying with them and discovering that people actually really wanted to know about Jesus. So that kind of set a seed in my heart that has only grown really over the last, years. And basically, I heard about Tenerife and I went there for a week with a friend. And I'd always felt actually that I was going to be called to Ibiza to be part of 24/7 there. But when I was in Tenerife, I was faced with another option that I just loved, and I just really clicked with the community. And I really felt a bit confused, but I really prayed about it, obviously. And I felt like God said to me, Rachel, it's about the work, not the place, and I want you here. So 6 weeks later, I'd come back to Sheffield. I'd handed my notice in everything I did, and I moved out to Tenerife to be part of the living room ministry, and that was 14 years ago.
So that's kind of mad, isn't it? To quit everything because you weren't going to get a salary out there. It was just a crazy step of faith, wasn't it, Rachel?
Yeah, it was. And I definitely think that's been one of the challenges, that level of sacrifice, I think, being away from family, being away from friends, being away from your community. And I think laying down a career, laying down financial security. For many years, I had to really lay down the thought that I would meet anyone, the right person. I was like, I might actually live this way and it might result in a single life. So, that also was a risk.
So what was the career that you were looking at that you might have been doing if you didn't do this then, Rachel?
Well, this is the amazing thing about God really is I actually studied languages at university. So I did French and Spanish. So I imagine I probably would have gone into something possibly along those lines. But the fact that God was just equipping me to live in Spain is just brilliant. And it has been really amazingly useful.
And so you've gone out there, you felt God speak to you just for a couple of weeks. Now you kind of come back and you said, this is what I'm going to do. Some people listening, they may be thinking, hey, I've got an idea, something like that. What were the steps you took to make that happen, Rachel? That someone thinking, listening to this, hey, I've got a passion. Give us your journey of those steps that you took, Rachel.
I definitely think short-term missions are really special. I think that they give you a chance to have a taster of what that life is like. I think it teaches you things about yourself, things about God, and it helps you step out in a safe environment with people who are experienced. So it can help you discover where your passions are. For me, obviously, I really was feeling led to be part of that. And so what I did was I just stepped back from that, really sought God over it. I spoke to people. I think the wisdom of many counsellors and of speaking to friends you trust is really good. And just looking at where God has spoken in the past and looking as well at your situation that you are in, is it a sensible option? Obviously, I do. Stepping out doesn't always mean it's the sensible choice, but I think we can also know if that is right for us by looking at where we're at and what our situations in life are. But then I just waited on God. I was in the Word and just sought His leading, and I refused to make a decision until I heard from God.
So tell us what you did. Tell us Tenerife. Tell us the context you're working in, what it's like. Give us an image. Obviously, we're on a podcast, so give us some descriptive, the area, the place, the people. Some of that we'd love to hear, Rachel.
Yeah, okay. So lots of people have been to Tenerife, so they have an idea of what it's like in their heads. And I would say if you've been on holiday to Tenerife, it's nothing like that where I work. So it's a lovely, beautiful place in some areas, and you have a really lovely holiday. But where I work is actually very messy. So we've got a centre on the nightlife strip, which is Las Americas. It's all the bars and all the clubs. And I always say that Las Americas is a place that you either really want to go to or you really want to avoid. And like most Christians
I'd probably want to avoid it.
Most Christians probably would. But most of the young people that we're working to, they really want to go. That's what they're seeking out when they've moved out there. So it's a very messy place. So there's, as you can imagine, it's a hedonistic lifestyle. So we see open binge drinking, nudity, lots of drug taking, open sex, violence, and it can be a very messy place. And for the young people there, they're seeking adventure. So maybe they have had a bad time at home. Maybe they're from a dysfunctional family. Often they're running away, actually, and they think they can get on a plane, fly to Tenerife and escape their problems and seek a bit of a party lifestyle. So when they arrive and they see these like endless bars and they get a job and they make friends, at first they think that this is great, they're living the life. But it's really interesting as we know people and we see their progression over only a few months, sometimes only a few weeks. If you fast forward, you see just how things have changed for them. So sometimes they've just seen and like experienced things they'd never thought that they would. And they realize that they're surrounded by broken people. They've got endless peer pressure on them from not only their friends, but often the managers of the bars as well. Addiction is rife. So it's alcohol, drugs, every night. Gambling is a huge thing that the men are struggling with there over at the moment. And sadly, it often leads to suicide. We've had a wave of that recently, which has been heartbreaking. Sometimes they owe money to the wrong people and they can get trapped there because then what happens is people take their passport until they pay them back. And they're kind of in this situation where they're never going to be able to earn enough. So it is like modern day slavery for some. And we've often stepped in to try and help get some people back to the UK. But we have to keep that very quiet.
It sounds horrendous. And you're there as a Christian community. So how do you do? And is there interest in gospel? Because you're really in a very challenging place from what you just described. Give us some stories of, because you're trying to be a presence, a Christian community within that space, aren't you, Rachel?
Yeah, and honestly, like these young people are falling off the edge sometimes. And yeah, they're so open to Christ. And it's like an unreached people group. It feels like sometimes. And one of my passions is to kind of help the church understand that they're so open and they really want to know. And I do understand that it can be intimidating. And I think sometimes people can be a bit intimidated by that age group of 18 to 40s. But we just find that they are just amazingly desperate to see someone who says they have the answers and to watch people who say that they know a God who can love them and change their lives. And so literally people seek us out to ask us about our faith. So in terms of like evangelism, it's in a way, it can be in one sense, one of the easiest places because they want to know, they're desperate to know. And like our policy is totally built on relationship building. So we really invest into the relationships and the friendships out there. So basically our two values that we really have built our centre, our ministry around, kind of actually I've adopted from 24/7, which really had an impact on me when I was working with them. And the first one is involvement. So our heart is just to get involved in that community, to step into the messiness of it and just have an active presence, whatever that might look like. So it's kind of interesting because you never really know what you're going to be faced with.
So give us a story of some individuals you've worked with, or one story of a person that you got involved with and then they met Christ.
Yeah, so one of my favourites is there was a girl who, really cool looking girl, and she was stood eating curry on the street corner one night, and I was talking to the group of people who were like she was stood with, and I literally said to her, "Oh yeah, you eating curry? I love curry." And we started like bonding over like curry and having a little chat. And anyway, it ended up, she's a German girl who was over there for the summer, and she said, "Oh, I'm a Christian." We just chatted to her and she was like, "Oh, I'd love to come to church at some point." I think she did come once, but obviously her lifestyle at that point was she was working until 4 a.m. on a Saturday night. So getting up in the morning to come to church with us was quite difficult for her. So she used to come to the living room, which is our centre on the strip. It's very much a workers' drop-in centre, and it's really like a youth club for adults. We've got pool tables, PS4s, tea and coffee, and we spend a lot of our time building relationships and friendships with people who come to see us there. And she came a lot, and she had a really good, amazing, actually, singing voice. So we often put barbecues on for the workers when they didn't have always a lot of money. They often didn't eat. So we used to every Friday just put a free barbecue on, and it was a way of just drawing people into the centre with the aim of us getting to know people better. And I asked her if she would sing and provide entertainment, because I knew she would come then and she'd bring her friends. So she put a set together, and yeah, we just had a really good friendship. I met up with her a lot. We hung out together. And after she left, and then when she came back a couple of years later, she just turned up one day. We were like, "Wow, hello, what are you doing here?" And she'd come back to work with her boyfriend, but she didn't work down the strip anymore. So she actually had got an apartment that happened to be right by our church. So she then started coming with us every Sunday, and she ended up hearing a testimony. Everything just clicked for her one day, and she just realised that she needed Christ in her life. So it was just amazing to then get alongside her and disciple her and encourage her. And when she moved back to Germany, she ended up going to a church, and she would call me and say, "Rachel, I think I'm here to like really show people what a relationship with Jesus is, because this church is a little bit empty and doesn't have that." And actually what's amazing is next month she's getting married to a Christian guy, and we're going over to her wedding. So I think I'll cry all the way through. We all started with curry.
Yeah, it's amazing. And when you get the journey of that and you don't back off from the gospel. So you've been there a while. I know you've got some challenges in that setting, and you're there, you're committed to the long term. You've just got married, which is very exciting. And I know presently you're in the UK and kind of splitting between the UK and Tenerife because of visa things with your husband and all of that. But just give us a little bit, as we're coming into land at this moment, Rachel, just give us the name of the place and the program you run. I know it's not a program because it's just some of the learning that you put. It's very entrepreneurial what you're doing, because I know that you travel from one end to the other just to build relationships and get involved in people's lives. And you really give yourself to those people. It's amazing, Rachel, to see what you do in just giving yourself in relationship, and the fruit of that is enormous. So just a little bit of your dream for the centre and the church and the program that you run.
So my dream and my passion is that people would feel empowered to know that they can step out and share the gospel, and it will have an impact. And I think we have many mission teams from churches and Bible colleges coming over to work with us for a couple of weeks. And without it, always that they're really nervous on the first night to go out to the nightlife strip and chat to people, which is understandable. And so was I when I first did it. But like very quickly, they realize actually, you can just be a friend. You can just chat to people and opportunities will come. And if you take them after, praying and asking the Holy Spirit to fill and go with you, then he's going to give you the words to say. And they come back so excited and encouraged that God can use them and it can be easy. And I really want to see this fear of evangelism really broken down. And I'd love my heart is that the church and this next generation would naturally just live out in whatever sphere they're in, whatever ministry they're placed in, just living their life for Jesus, knowing that when you pray, when you're intimate with Christ, when you're filled up with the Holy Spirit, and then you will step out and just be friend. The thing is, Jesus was friends with sinners and the lost. He's just ate and drank with them. He didn't preach at them and Bible bash them. He just spent time with them and they loved him. So my heart is that Christians would be likable. And I also really believe that part of that is experience. And we would love to give people space to practice and prepare for those God moments when they come, so that people aren't so thrown and don't suddenly think, oh, someone's asking me something and freeze, but actually like, oh, I've stepped out and I've heard someone say this, or I practiced with my friend sharing my testimony, so I'm a bit more comfortable with it now. And I'm not sure we always do that. If we're not sure we always teach in that way. But my passion, and have written a training program that we'd love to launch in the future, which would invite people to come and practice putting some of those disciplines in action. And just to share something on that, we had a girl who came to work with us who was from Eastern Europe, and she'd heard about some of the work in the brothels and the lap dance bars, and she really wanted to come and help support us because a lot of the girls were from Eastern Europe. So she came over and we put packages together, like little gift packages, and went in and talked to the girls. I tried in my like rubbish Spanish, but she just chatted away to the girls from her country. And when we went to one of them, there was a girl there who shared that she'd only just started. She'd not taken a client and she didn't know if she could. And this girl said, like, if you could do any job, rather than this, if you could do any job, what would you do? And she said, I'd love to be an au pair in England. Well, it just so happened that the girl on team was an au pair in England. So she could share with her all of her connections, her knowledge from her country, from her culture of how to do that. And she prayed with her. And then we got an email like later to say she'd actually left that work without ever taking a client.
Oh, wow.
And the thing that really touched us about that was God could see her in that club, and he could see a broken Lithuanian girl who's had a heart to be an au pair in England. And so he sent a Lithuanian girl who was an au pair in England right into the place where she was. And our ethos and our passion is that everybody would know that we are all sent, and God's got a plan to send us to the people he wants us to connect with, and all we have to do is step out and go.
Hey, Rachel, everybody I'm sure listening to this picks up your passion and the work that you're doing. Just to give us again the name of the ministry that you're with in Tenerife, and we just want to pray blessing on you. You're very entrepreneurial. Some of the things that you do, I just find so exciting, but the gospel is front and center for you and for all you do. And you've been out there a long time and you're still there and you're still as enthusiastic. Sometimes working in those difficult environments, it can cause us to burn out and be... It's tough. I mean, let's face it, and dealing with some of the most broken, but your passion and your life, and you're there for Jesus, which is wonderful. So give us the name of the ministry, and it's been great to talk to you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. It's the Living Room. We're called the Living Room Centre, and you can find us online, but we're also connected to Tenerife Family Church. And it's got an amazing oversight and an amazing pastoral team. So come and visit us if you're ever on holiday in Tenerife.
Thanks, Rachel, for joining me today. The thing I come away with from this podcast is that God calls people into some of the toughest places and spaces. And Rachel on the strip is there bringing light, and the Holy Spirit is with her, touching people's lives. I was just impacted by her passion and enthusiasm for the gospel. I'll be back with another gospel entrepreneur next week, but you can catch up on all the previous conversations I've had on the UCB Player app or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening today. Gospel Entrepreneurs is a UCB podcast in partnership with the Revelation Trust.